Welcome to the Wisconsin Gardener. I'm your host, Shelley Ryan. You can't see it, you can't even smell it yet, but spring really is just around the corner. And we're here to help you and your garden get ready for the new growing season. On this edition of the Wisconsin Gardener, we'll show you how to get a jump on spring by forcing trees and shrubs to bloom indoors. We'll demonstrate the easy steps to starting your own flower and vegetable seeds. And we'll take a look at some scented herbs to provide year-round interest. All this and more coming up on the Wisconsin Gardener.
Major funding for the production of the Wisconsin Gardener has been provided by Jung's Seed and Nursery Company with garden centers in Randolph, Stevens Point, Madison, and Sun Prairie. And the distributors of Fertile Loam, a complete line of lawn and garden products for the homeowner, sold exclusively by independent retail outlets throughout Wisconsin. Additional funding has been provided by Mr. Shrub Landscapes of Watertown.
There are plenty of things to do to prepare for the new growing season, both indoors and out. We're at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Arboretum to do some spring pruning. With me is Ken Wood, Arboretum naturalist. Ken, there's snow on the ground. Why are we out here pruning?
There's a little too much snow, actually. But this is the best time of year, next several weeks, to do renewal pruning of our larger shrubs.
You mean late winter, early spring?
Late winter, early spring.
Why?
Well, the reserve of the plant is locked up in the roots, and if we prune before the growth starts in the spring, that reserve is still there and can come back into new growth. Also, it's a good time to get a good clean cut. The bark is a little more brittle.
Frozen.
Frozen, right. And also there's likely to be much less problem with disease spread by insects or whatever.
Yeah, there's not a few out here that I see.
Not too many bugs today.
All right, if late winter, early spring is the best time, is there a time where we should not be pruning?
Well, there is a saying, prune when the knife is sharp.
Do it when you can.
In other words,
yeah.
Whenever you can get at it. But yes, it's true, there is a time. Late July, August, early September are not good times to renewal prune shrubs. And the reason is that once you do the pruning, the plant may try to put on a lot of new growth, and that growth probably won't have a long enough time to harden off properly for the winter.
So they could actually die if we have a rough winter.
Right. You could lose either the new growth itself or sometimes the whole shrub.
And so this time of year, when we do it until we see buds forming, basically?
Right, until new growth starts forming on the twigs. At that point, the plant is putting its reserves into the top part of the plant. And
okay.
Better not to prune it too heavily at that time.
Okay, if there are good and bad times to prune, are there good and bad ways to prune?
Oh, of course. The books always say yes and no.
Okay.
A lot of us would look at a shrub like this and try to reduce its size by giving it a haircut, cutting everything off at a certain height. But that is not a renewal process. It doesn't rejuvenate the plant. When you have broken twigs or cut twigs up at a height like this, new growth will start right up at the top where there's the most sunlight, and these branches then just get older and older, and there's no vigorous new stuff coming up from the bottom of the plant.
And if all the vigorous growth is flat across here, you're cutting out the sunlight to the plant too.
That's right.
So are you cutting out flower buds? I mean, are you just really...
You're reducing the flowering, right.
So
just takes away the natural form.
All right, then what is the right way to do this?
Well, to renewal prune, the idea is to take out older stems, and the red osier dogwood is a good one to demonstrate on because of the color. You can see that these older stems are getting corky bark on the branches.
So you're losing the red.
Lose the whole thing that you want the red osier dogwood for, right. But renewal pruning, if you're using loppers like this, involves getting just as close to the ground as you possibly can, cutting off the stem and taking it out.
And so then we just pull these out like that.
Right.
Now, so you do that with all of the older growth?
Oh, on a shrub like this, probably half of the older stems in any one year. It might take a couple years to renewal prune a plant like this. You do it 2 different winters. If the plant was really badly overgrown, you might even take 3 years.
Okay. Well, you handed this to me earlier. Would I use this at times rather than the loppers?
If you've got a shrub that's has really large stems, a pruning saw like this one with reverse blades on it that it cuts when you pull it back on it.
So, okay.
With the narrow point, That allows you to get into the center of the shrub and really clean things out without destroying all the new growth at the same time.
Well, when you say something with thicker, larger stems, I think immediately of lilacs. Is that one that I
Lilacs are a really good example of a plant that you'd probably want to use this kind of saw on. Right.
So lilacs will benefit from
very
renewal
much.
pruning.
In fact, older lilac that's been left alone for many years, if you renewal prune it properly, you may be left with some spindly stalks that kind of flop. That's exactly what you want. Then the sunlight is getting down to the base of the plant. Your neighbor's going to look over the fence and say, "Oh, you've destroyed that shrub," but you've probably done it exactly right.
So if my neighbor doesn't like it, I'm on the right track.
That's a good guess, yes.
Okay, well, I have trouble visualizing it now. This one is so dense in there. I have trouble seeing what that's going to look like when you've taken out a half to a third of this.
Well, we did one over here, Shelley, that was exactly the same shape. And a week ago, you wouldn't have been able to tell these two plants apart.
Wait a minute, these two were the same height, the same denseness?
Looked identical as a week ago. And yet, by taking out, half or maybe a little more of the biggest stems, we've rejuvenated the shrub. It now is a more manageable height, but it's still got its natural form.
And it's got the red color, too.
Lots of red growth on it, right.
Well, okay, you mentioned it's at a more natural height. What if it doesn't quite fit? I mean, what if it's still too tall after I've done my renewal pruning?
I'd let you come in and snip out a few little twigs, but if it's really still too tall, you probably have a shrub that's too big for the spot. Think about planting something that's a little smaller.
So pick something appropriate to the site.
Right.
Okay, so far we've mentioned the dogwoods and you mentioned lilacs. What else benefits from renewal pruning?
Forsythias, viburnums, there are several other kinds of dogwoods. Any of these larger, multiple-stemmed, vigorous growing shrubs.
So I think of spirea, which has such a graceful cascading shape.
Right, that lovely vase shape.
And we keep that shape by doing renewal pruning rather than the haircut.
Correct.
Okay, is there anything else we should do this time of year once we're done pruning?
Early in the spring is the best time to fertilize shrubs too, so fertilizing is important.
So let the snow melt a little bit, maybe?
A little more than now.
Okay, thanks, Ken.
You're welcome.
And hang on to these prunings. Next up, we're going to show you how to make them bloom. It's hard to believe that these dead-looking branches that we just pruned can be brought indoors to provide color. That's exactly what's going to happen. We're in Soldiers Grove in southwest Wisconsin, and I'm with John Zaire, who grows and sells fresh-cut flowers. John, you said we were going to force these. What does that mean?
Shelley, forcing deciduous branches into bloom simply means by cutting branches that normally bloom early in the spring, and by cutting them during the winter and bringing them indoors and placing them in water in a warm environment, you will get them to bloom on you before they normally will outside.
So is this something that I could do on a year-round basis?
Well, no. Generally, deciduous things require a certain period of cold treatment to induce the bud set of the flower, and that's usually obtained anytime after the first of the year.
So they need a good dose of winter in order to bloom?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what can we start out with that's easy?
Forsythia, what you have there right next to you, is one of the most common or easy.
These yellow flowers are gorgeous too. This really glows. So if this is easy, then I just go out and I do my regular pruning and I bring these in and I'll get flowers?
Well, basically that's what you have to do, although generally deciduous things bloom on second-year-old wood, so you want to make sure you get second-year-old wood rather than first-year wood, and what you're holding there is first-year-old wood.
Okay.
Next to you there I have second-year-old wood, and you can see the difference here with the large buds, and these are all flower buds, where what you have there are just leaf buds.
And they look much more smooth and very bare.
Right.
So, okay, I cut these and I bring them in, and then what do I do?
Well, you'll place them in warm water with a floral preserve is best, and generally they like to be a little bit acclimated into the warm temperature, so if you could leave them in a cooler environment first, such as your basement or in a garage or something, your entry, and where it's 55 or 65 degrees for a couple weeks. And also what really helps them is if you could mist them once or twice a week with a little mist.
Bottle?
Sure. And maybe place like a plastic bag around them to hold the humidity. And then anytime after the first few weeks, you can bring them into your living room and arrange with them.
Oh, okay. Well, my basement is definitely cool, but I have no windows. Is light important?
No, you don't. Light is not required, and once you bring them into your living, just the natural light from the environment will be just fine.
Okay. Well, let's look at some of the other ones we've got here. This one has really beautiful glowing pink flowers. This is quince, and it's not as hardy as some of the other things we're going to talk about. I don't normally think of this as a common one for forcing, but it works quite well.
Yes. One thing that's more common to people is this is just a branch from a plum tree that I have in my yard. And the plums are in the prunus family, and generally anything in the prunus family works real well, such as cherries or apricots, any of your flowering plum trees or shrubs, such as...
Like the flowering almond then, too.
Flowering almond works very well.
So even with my fruit trees, though, I can go out then and prune them and bring them in and have bloom.
That's right. And other than even blooming flowers, you can force things just for their leaves, or what we have here is tamaracks or larch, and that I'm just forcing it for its fine green needles, and or just used it with its interesting texture or bud texture there that it has.
Well, and either of those would be interesting this time of year.
Yeah, and along with other things too, you can do is this. Here we have curly willow, and that's just, you can use just as itself. It doesn't require any forcing, and it has very nice texture and color. You can use it in an arrangement with other flowers if you want to add it with other things. And along with that are things such as dogwood, red twig dogwood, or yellow twig dogwood. So
we don't need any flowers or buds, and they look just great.
Right.
Well, now this is one I recognize. Every time I see this, I do think spring. This is pussy willow.
Well, that's one of the most common things people force or have generally around Easter, that blooms just outside in itself. And these are the blossoms you see on it right here, called catkins. And but there again, when you select something to force, you want to make sure that you get branches with the flower buds on them, which you see here are the more the larger buds, versus something you see on this branch are just leaf buds.
So as you said, leaves are okay, but if we're looking for flowers, look for the more swollen buds on these.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. This is a surefire cure for cabin fever. We frequently have a short growing season in the Midwest. You can get a head start on spring by starting your own seeds indoors. With me is University of Wisconsin Extension horticulturist Tom Kalb from Kenosha County. And Tom, what are the advantages to growing our own transplants?
Shelley, when we use transplants, we're going to be weeks ahead in our gardening versus using seeds. Now, some crops like tomatoes, melons, and peppers, those crops demand a long, warm growing season. And we don't always get that here in the upper Midwest.
No.
So use transplants for those crops, and that can be all the difference in getting a bountiful crop that we're proud of versus a very disappointing crop.
Meaning no crop.
No crop. We want to avoid that.
Okay. Well, one of the reasons I got into starting my own seeds was I'm interested in heirloom vegetables.
Oh.
When I grow normal broccoli, I can go down to the nursery, the local greenhouse, and get quality transplants. But if I'm starting something a little odd like an heirloom tomato, I have to start my own seeds.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Well, we're going to start today by growing an heirloom seed called brandywine. What's our first step?
Okay, let's start with the container. And I like using these black plastic cell packs because the plastic is a lightweight, sturdy material, and the cell packs allow each plant its individual cell so it can get off to a strong start. Now, this is going to work for most crops, but some crops like the vine crops, we're going to use peat pots for them. And with the peat pots, we're going to put the soil inside here, and then we're going to insert the seed, and about 3 to 4 weeks later, that vine crop, cucumber, melon, whatever, it's going to be ready to go right into the ground, and we won't be disturbing the roots at all.
And then the pot just dissolves, disintegrates.
Exactly.
Okay, do we need drainage holes with these, or did they have them with them?
It's critical that in your pot that you have drainage holes, because that will eliminate problems with overwatering.
Okay. And what kind of soil do we have in there? Is that garden soil?
No, we never want to use garden soil. Garden soil is full
Bad.
of disease and poorly drained. What we want to use is a soilless seed starter mix. It's a very lightweight material. It drains well. That's what we want, free of disease.
Okay, I've got the seeds here. Now, do I put one or more?
Oh, you want to put a couple seeds in each cell just in case you have a bum seed there, because you always want to make sure you have at least one strong seedling in each cell.
Okay.
And you're just going to lightly tap them in and cover them up with the soil.
And then we label.
Yes, always want to label.
Don't forget that step.
Exactly. The next thing is watering. As
Okay.
far as watering goes, we want to keep the soil fairly moist but not soggy, because when we have soggy soil, this is what we have.
And I recognize
Yes,
this.
this is the scourge of all people who grow transplants, damping off. You can see the stems rotting here near the soil line. These plants are goners. So avoid overwatering, and also cool temperatures can create this problem.
Oh.
So what we're going to do is we're going to set our planting right here on a heating pad under low heat.
Okay.
Okay, now that's going to get the soil temperatures up to about 70 to 80 degrees. The soil is going to warm up, and then the seedlings are just going to pop out of the ground. Once they pop out of the ground, we take them off the heating pad, and then we have the planting itself under room temperatures. It'll do just fine.
All right, now we planted 2 or 3 seeds in each cell. Now they're looking a little crowded. Do we leave them?
No, we don't want them to crowd one another because they could stunt one another's growth. So we'll take the best seedling in each cell, and then we're going to clip out or lightly pull out the weak one. And there you go.
Okay. And then what's the next step? I would bet fertilizing.
They need some fertilizer because our soil mix has very little nutrients in, and this is the stage when we should start fertilizing.
All right.
When you select a fertilizer, look for the 3 numbers on the package: the nitrogen, the phosphate, and the potash. The second number, the phosphate, is critical for good root growth and good shoot establishment. Make sure there's plenty of phosphate, but you should also have some nitrogen and potash in there for good plant development.
Now, if we see this on our plants, they definitely need fertilizer.
Your plants will tell you when they're hungry, and this plant is starving.
Okay.
You notice the small leaves in the pale yellow color. This plant needs a boost of fertilizer.
Okay. What about lighting?
Lighting is what the plants need to generate new energy. Fluorescent tubes are the way to go. They're a very efficient way to provide light to the plants, and we want to get the tubes as close as possible to the plants to give them as much light as possible. But you don't want to burn the plants. So usually about a 6 to 12 inch difference between the plants and the lighting is what we're looking for. And you can always tell if the lights are too close by just putting your hands over the plant. If your hand's uncomfortably warm, then so are the plants. So then we're going to lift the lights up just a little bit.
All right, now this is just the opposite problem.
That's right. These plants are jumping up to the sky searching for light. They need more light. So when you see spindly plants like this, we need to get more light, bring the lights down a little bit closer for these plants.
Okay, and then one of the more important questions is when to start these seeds. Now that information should be on the back of the seed packages.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
You're welcome.
You don't have to start everything from seed every year. Next up, some herb plants that you can grow year-round. We've shown you how easy it is to start flowers and vegetables by seed. Now we're going to look at some herbs that you may want to add to your spring shopping list. With me is herb gardener Anna Dudla, and we're in Mazomanie in south central Wisconsin. We're looking at some herbs that can be grown year-round. We've got pineapple sage and rose geranium. Now, Anna, are these herbs that I also want to start from seed?
Probably not. First of all, you can't find seeds for pineapple sage. It's very difficult. And secondly, if you buy seeds of scented geraniums, they're always mixed, and you probably won't get what you want.
Well, I know they come in a lot of smells, so if you're really looking for rose or peppermint scents, you need to smell it before you buy it.
Right, and you can find them in garden centers, or if you have a friend that has some, ask for a slip. The scented geraniums are very interesting. There are over 400 known varieties.
Oh, wow.
And they came to this country in a very interesting route. Sailors found them growing natively in South Africa and thought they were nice, so they took slips to their homes in Europe, and from Europe they made their way to this country.
So they've been part of our culture for a long time.
A very long time.
All right, how do I care for something like this?
Well, the plant can be grown and set out in the garden after danger of frost is past, and it will grow very nicely through the season and will attain a large size, at least 3 foot across.
So then would I bring the entire plant back in the fall? It overwinters indoors, I take it?
It does winter indoors.
Okay.
I don't have the kind of room in my home to bring big plants in. So what I do is I take slips, and it's very easy to do. Simply cut the plant off below these small leaves, and then put them in soil, thoroughly moistened soil. And then what I do is put a plastic bag over the cuttings, which has a vent for venting off extra moisture. Just leave the plants in this plastic arrangement, which is like a little greenhouse, and do not water it again. And in 3 weeks, you'll have rooted cuttings. These were rooted, and I made them exactly 3 weeks ago.
So then you take the bag off.
Take the bag off and then divide the plants. I have 3 in here. Pot them in individual pots, small pots, and then winter them in the small pots. And then in the spring, you can plant them out.
So this is a way to get plants from friends or to increase the amount of plants you've got, too.
Or to make plants for friends.
Oh, very good idea. All right, this is pineapple sage you mentioned. It has a beautiful, almost fresh pineapple flavor. How do I care for this?
Well, it grows in really hot weather and in full sun and loves that. And of course, we don't have those conditions in our homes during the winter.
No.
And so they tend to get a little spindly, and it's nice just to go back, about every 6 weeks and snip out the growing tip of the plant.
So you're literally just pinching off.
Pinch them off. Right.
And that's to keep it from getting too leggy, like you said.
It keeps them nice and compact so that when the plant goes outside, it's really ready to grow rather than kind of having to adjust to the spindly nature.
Well, and I've used the cuttings that you've done in fresh teas. They've got a wonderful smell to them.
They are great.
I happen to grow it actually because of the red flowers. I don't cook with it a lot other than in fresh teas, but the flowers attract hummingbirds.
Yes, and they're a beautiful red.
They're nice. Now this is one I'm moving in that I've had trouble growing rosemary indoors. It seems to dry out. It's fine outdoors, but it doesn't work indoors.
Rosemary translated means dew of the sea.
Oh.
You have to realize it grows natively in the Mediterranean and is continually wafted by warm sea breezes. We do not have this condition in our homes during the winter. And so in order to help the plant, I spritz it about 3 times a week at night. Pull the bag up over it, close down the top, leave the bag on overnight, and then remove it the next morning. This keeps the humidity tight around the plant, and it really helps the rosemary to grow.
So this really is a miniature greenhouse again, Hickey.
Right.
And you don't have to do anything like that when you set it outside.
No.
Okay.
Our conditions in Wisconsin seem to be such that the plant grows very nicely outdoors.
Okay. Well, now this is one that you can't actually grow indoors year-round. It's a hardy perennial, chives, but it's obviously dormant during the winter. How did you get such healthy-looking chives this time of year?
Well, in the September, I pot up a division from my parent plant, put it in a pot, and put it somewhere outside to stay there until the first of the year. So it freezes and it's dormant.
Okay.
Then I bring it in, put it in a warm, sunny window, and within 2 weeks, I have fresh chives.
Fresh chives. Great way to enjoy it year-round.
Oh, yes.
Speaking of uses, too, let's look at another one. This is actually the rose geranium, and this is a way to enjoy it.
Yes, it was fun yesterday to accept the challenge of developing something special for this program. And so this is a rose geranium tea cake made as one would make an ordinary tea cake and then glazed with a rose geranium syrup.
So rose geraniums have been used in culinary cooking for a while.
Yes, in fact, in the South, during the Civil War, when the South was cut off from all of its sources of spices and flavorings, people turned to what was growing around them. And the rose geranium was one plant that they could use.
I can't wait to taste it. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.
Consider adding some of these herbs to your spring herb garden. As we've shown you, there's still a lot to do before spring actually arrives. There are shrubs to prune and seedlings to grow. And remember, try to be patient this time of year. Allow your soil to dry out before you start digging. Your county extension agent can provide more information and bulletins on the topics we've covered today. Well, I've got some more work to do before the buds leaf out. Thanks for joining me on the Wisconsin Gardener.
Major funding for the production of the Wisconsin Gardener has been provided by Jung's Seed and Nursery Company with garden centers in Randolph, Stevens Point, Madison, and Sun Prairie, and the distributors of Fertile Loam, a complete line of lawn and garden products for the homeowner, and Natural Guard, gardening nature's way. Additional funding has been provided by Mr. Shrub Landscapes of Watertown. For a free one-year subscription to the Wisconsin Gardener's companion newsletter, write to the Wisconsin Gardener Notebook, Wisconsin Public Television, 821 University Avenue, Madison, Wisconsin, 53706.